Hello, Rachel.
Hi, Ashley. It's so nice to see you.
I know it's nice to see you too. We've talked for 29 minutes.
Now everyone can finally be filled in on our discussions.
You have fixed Jack Barlow. We have fixed computers. We've really done a lot.
I know we've really had a full day of work, actually. Good for
We
us.
have. So that's it. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We're done. Rachel and
Yeah,
I are
problem
signing
solved.
off.
Yeah, thanks again for
Problem
being
solved.
here.
Um, guys, I'm really excited about this episode because Rachel actually reached out to me and said, "Hey, I am seeing a lot more kids that have ADHD and ODD that need supports and need help. And I'm, kind of like unlocking the key um to what's going on with each individual person. Do you want to get together and talk about this?" And I was like, yes. And not only that, but I don't want to plan it. I want to make this like a delightfully messy kitchen table discussion because I think that's what we need. Because when we're trying to problem solve for a kid that looks like this or a kid that looks like that, we need these like, oh, maybe this would work and maybe that would work. But we also need Rachel's structured, intellectual, um, simple wisdom
Structured.
to help. Well,
Talking about
organized. Let's
structure.
call it organized. Can we call it organized?
Yes, we can. I already disclosed that I do have ADHD, so I always laugh when people say that I'm organized or structured. I'm like, oh, you have no idea the effort that has gone into this.
Oh, so I did not know I think this is relatable. So we'll go on this tangent for a second. I did not know that I had ADHD growing up. Like I'm a girl that masks. And I used to always say I am like a walking executive plan, and I actually am. But what I now know is that is a crazy detailed coping strategy.
Oh, yeah.
I think my body was like, I don't like being this disorganized. I don't like my brain going in so many different directions. So I'm going to make lists and I'm going to have color coding and I'm going to do all the things. And then actually is a coping strategy. It isn't that I'm made that way.
Exactly. It's the inattentive girls. The ADHD for girls, that inattentive profile for women who are girls. They don't get diagnosed because they're not running around the classroom. They're sort of maladaptive daydreaming. But the ones that do well enough without intervention, they just don't get anything. At least that's what I was. I was always
Yeah.
like, okay, she's doing fine. I don't think we need to do anything for this. She doesn't need anything. Probably don't, but man, it would have been nice before going to college, even in a PhD program where you have to self organize, you have to have those strategies. It took some failure at first to say, oh, wow, this is what I need to do because if you didn't have the compensatory strategies because you didn't need it, you're not a kid running around the
Yeah.
classroom and disruptive. Anyway, that old
Yeah.
and intensive
I thought
profile,
that
guys, it's hard.
so mine all was like totally self-directed, self-created. I had no idea that I was doing it. I had no idea I needed it. Um, and what happened was when anxiety kicked in, like around college, what I wish that I had had the coping strategies to realize that it was anxiety and ADHD because I didn't know what I needed. And then anxiety got the best of me, and so like I used to say I have the kind of anxiety that fuels me and drives me, and I do, but man, it can drive you to some really burned out places.
Right. Like anxiety linked with perfectionism is hard.
Yes.
That is a hard combination to have. But anxiety isn't the devil. I see a lot of anxiety plans right now where people say, okay, for the 5-4, we need it for anxiety and that's fine. Like anxiety isn't bad. We need anxiety because anxiety tells us, hey, this is hard or dangerous. You need to work on this. This is important to you. But when it becomes controlling and perfectionism where you actually can't stop until it becomes a certain way, that's when you're getting the maladaptive phase. That's when we need,
Yeah.
okay, you need some supports, you need some help with this.
Help me, Rachel.
Help me first.
Help me, help me before you help all these other people out there. Help me. Oh my gosh.
We're like, let's talk about these kids, but first, can we talk about my ADHD?
So back to me. about everybody else, but back to me.
Everyone,
Oh my
everything
gosh.
we're talking about. Okay, we're
Yeah.
getting on.
Now we're back. We're back.
We're
So
back.
Rachel has been a guest on the podcast before, but why don't you just do a quick introduction? Tell us, who you are, what you do, where you are, that stuff.
All right, I'm Dr. Rachel Schwartz. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I work for the Watson Institute where I do training and consultation. I do that for schools, for disability organizations, adult organizations across the age range and across disabilities. I have was trained in low instance. I'm a special educator, board certified behavior analyst, and I have a PhD in cognitive and physical disabilities, which is just a fun way of saying special education. But I trained across the lifespan, and even though I was really trained primarily in low incidence disabilities, I was telling Ashley that I have just fallen in love with this high incidence disability population, particularly these ADHD groups, partly because I see myself in some of it, but really because it is the ADHD or ODD kids, these kids that I think need so much support, specialized support, and they get sort of tapped or siloed into being, they just need they just have ADHD. It's just they can't pay attention. And it's so misunderstood, so misguided, I think, in our planning. And that's why I want to chat about it. It's just so important. And I think we have a lot of different ways that we can reframe ADHD and ODD for professionals and parents to think about it less as a burden, but more as a beautiful brain that just needs some differing supports.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think back to a couple of kids that I have supported. When I get an intake call, especially if it's a middle schooler, but also if it's a like upper elementary schooler where this stuff really starts to like see, it's like they aren't just spicy, they aren't just wild, they aren't funny. It's like the funny isn't funny anymore kind of
Yeah.
situation. For me, most of my intake, do you get most of your calls for kids that are in like into third grade to like ninth grade? Is that pretty much where?
I I do a lot in elementary, but I will say the kids that I get for that age range are the kids exactly as you described, where they just got out of being cute and funny. So they're
Yeah.
sort of quirky, second grade. Kids are weird. So, like, a lot of the weird things you don't really care about. But then third, fourth grade, and then, fifth, they're like, well, now this is annoying and it's
Right.
atypical. So the problem that wasn't a problem becomes a problem. And now we're trying to address something that's a real pattern.
Yeah. I think a lot happens when you're not cute anymore. Um, a lot of like
Yeah.
issues happen, when you're not cute anymore. And so, but when I get these intake calls, what I normally say is, um, hey, you know what? Let's take a quick pause. I'm going to take this call. Hang on one second. Hel- Hello, this is Ashley. Oh, Grayson, is my son. Can I give you his number? Okay, so just in case that was weird, we just got a call from college and I wanted to make sure everything was okay. So we might have a weird blurb, but Rachel and I will we'll pick right back up where we were and everybody know everything is totally fine. Um, so when I get these calls at intake, a lot of times what I say to parents is, I give them like 2 or 3 minutes. I say, just give me a synopsis of what's going on, right? And they tell me, and I'm like, honestly, I could probably finish this story because what happens is kids will kind of latch on to one or two coping strategies because they will have gotten it from the school counselor or their outside counselor or a book that the parents read. And, it might be one AirPod in their ear, or they might naturally want their hood up, or they might know that they can go to a safe adult. And then there's a sub in class, or there's a hard ass teacher, or there's somebody, and they utilize their coping strategy. And the teacher says, oh, take out your AirPod, put down your hood. You're not allowed to have a quiet space. And before you know it, the kid needs out of the classroom. They need out of the classroom now, and they have to body check a teacher to get out of there. And then we move, from this place to the next place, and then all of a sudden they're in trouble. And when you say to the kid, like, what the heck? Why did you body check the teacher on your way out of the door? They're like, because she told me to take out my AirPod and that's my safety net. Um, and so I think like that, and parents are always like, yes, that is eureka. That is exactly what's happening. Um, So, what I try to do then is, and I'm curious about what you try to do. That's where this question is going. Because what I try to do as a layperson is I'm like, okay, well, we need to figure out what the issue is. Like, where are in your child's specific profile, where are their stronger needs and what do we do with those needs? Right? Like, does that kind of like ring true to
Yeah.
you as a clinician?
Yes. So in a story you described, they have a couple strategies, like you said. And someone says, hey, you can't have your earbuds in class. I see this often with phones. They'll say, well, I need my phone. It's this. And it's like, at some point, you might not be able to have your phone. That is a good strategy, but it cannot be your only. When they do that evaluation and they're looking at, okay, this is where they are in working memory, this is where they are in self regulation, exactly as you described. Where are their levels? Where are their deficits? And what's tricky about executive functioning is that there isn't really just one curriculum that you can say, oh, this is going to teach them all those areas. There's a lot of different research based strategy for each area. So if you have deficits in working memory, okay, this is your plan needs to address in teaching these strategies. If you have deficits with self-regulation, here are the strategies. So it really is a table almost of sorts of saying, okay, for addressing this is what we're going to do. And then you're aligning that to the IEP. So in this case, if I were to come in, I'd be watching that kid. I'd be looking at their records. I'd be seeing, okay, what have they done in the past? How old are they? What are we working as? And what are we working towards? So if we are working towards, you actually can't have headphones as a 11th grader in class when the teacher's doing a lecture. It's considered contextually inappropriate. I'm not saying you can. We might say, you know what, though, he needs it, and that's fine. He doesn't
Yeah.
need to. He doesn't need to follow that. But let's say, okay, just in case that becomes disruptive, let's think about other safety nets and other ways that we can calm him. What are other things? Because if you need that all the time, that's showing me also what intense anxiety you have in that environment. How can we lessen it? How do we cope with it? What are other strategies? So we're those kind of plans and plans in general for kids with ADHD, it is not as simple as preferential seating. You are looking at where exactly, if I see one large
What
arm,
about extra time?
geez,
If you did
look,
preferential seating and extra time, would that be enough?
yeah, oh my gosh, look, do they need it? Probably. But you know what? But most kids need that anyway. But the extra time, it is really, let me back up too. It all depends too on the profile. So if you're a top-down approach kid, that means that you are messy. You have trouble with task initiation. Your deficits are really in that planning, prioritization, organization. You need top-down approaches, meaning cognitive first approaches. Let me teach you how to prioritize. Let me teach you how to make a checklist. Let me teach you how to chunk up your work. Let me teach you how to use a homework planner. The top-down approaches are cognitive first. For the kids who have sensory issues or in that environment, need the headphones, need the music, have trouble with their self-regulation as the primary problem or impulsivity, those are kids that you need bottom up. You're not worried about think about this first. And we usually try to just make them cognitive first. They need, it sounds kind of woo, but it does work. Grounding exercises. They need the movement breaks. Those are the kids that need to get up and walk. Those are the kids that need to learn some of those deep breaths, those mindfulness, how to take minutes, those check-ins, that space away. Once they get those bottom up as a primary, then you can teach them to think about it. But sometimes what we do for these kids is we focus on, okay, we're just going to give you movement breaks, but they're a top down kid. They're a cognitive kid. We need to focus on how to teach them to organize. So they're getting these movement breaks, but they're not getting organizational help. So the problems still exist. And then everyone's frustrated. You get the movement breaks, you get extra time. Why aren't you doing this? Well, they need help to actually physically organize their materials to get started. These are kids for task initiation. What I'll do is I'll put like a little vibrating timer on their desk that goes off every 3 or 4 minutes. They were not staying on task. So it just cues them every 4 minutes to go look at their paper. Oh, where was I? Oh, I do have to write this down. Yeah, I mean, truly, or it's on their something. So I
Yeah.
think first of all is aligning the approaches to the primary problem. It doesn't mean because you have deficits in executive functioning that you need every single piece of that. What's your primary problem? Is it impulsivity? Is it self-regulation? Or is it simply you cannot stay on task? You cannot, for
Yeah.
the life of you, figure out where your binder is. What is the primary issue? There's going to be a blend of
Or you
both.
miss your allergy shot?
Or you miss, look, there's a blend but you have to focus on the primary. And then that's
Yeah.
where I make like the table, like I described. Find it.
I
What's the
really
strategy?
like so I want to talk about both of those things. Like I love the table idea. I mean, this is the kind of thing where um I wish more people talked about it. Like we could look on paper, and honestly, I wish people wrote their reports like this. Like here are your relative weaknesses. Here are your deficits. And so you have a deficit in working memory, you have a deficit in processing speed, you have a deficit in, let's say even academics, like reading comprehension, right? And then here are some evidence-based strategies, evidence-based programs, curricula, intervention tools that will address that. And not just one, right? So if it's math calculation, everybody's going to say touch point math. Okay, well, like what else exists out there that's evidence based for math? And because like this kid doesn't like manipulatives, then what else could work?
If it's
Um,
math, it might also be when you think about the ADHD brain, truly there are some kids who cannot a deficit of essentially not understanding numbers as they represent. What do they represent? So when you have someone who, it's not just, hey, this is the rote facts, they might be able to memorize the rote facts, but truly understanding that broader concept, that requires a lot more intensive intervention and a lot more specialization. It's like ADHD and dyslexia. You can't just say, yeah, they're poor readers. No, they have dyslexia. That's a different way to address it. I
you have
mean,
to rewire it.
yes.
And right, yeah. So I love that idea of a chart. And what I want to say to parents is I'm seeing Rachel on IEP teams, a lot of people, a lot of administrators kind of saying to parents and advocates, like, hey, stay in your lane. We'll do the teaching. So I'm having school teams that are saying, um, we'll do the evaluation. Like, okay, yes, we acknowledge that your child needs multisensory, evidence-based, structured, systematic, spiraled, blah, 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 Orton Gillingham reading instruction. Um, but then they'll say, well, we're going to choose the program. And I'm like, well, but could we offer from the parent's perspective a little bit of help? Like, could we say, well, this child really struggles with body awareness. So Linda Midbell's not going to be a great option because the child struggles with body awareness. And like, could we say an example I always give about my own kid is if you gave him sand, it would be in your hair, his hair, and the hamster's cage in like 30 seconds,
Mhm.
even at 15 years old. So like, could we offer some suggestions about modifications? And they're
Yeah, they
like,
should.
well, but they don't. Like they're saying, "Nope, we
Yeah.
got it." And I'm like, "Okay, well, too bad we're gonna offer it anyway." So now we're gonna follow up with an email and we're gonna offer it. Um, and then another component that happens when we start talking about that stuff is they just start spitting out a bunch of acronyms, and parents are like, "Oh, what are you talking about?" And they're trying to write it down. So I love your idea of a chart because I think it would help for parents to be able to give their insights and knowledge about what's happened in the past, what happens in outside therapy, what they know about their kid as it applies to those ideas.
And for home, that will help them say, okay, so my kid struggles with task initiation. So when I'm at home, I need to create this kind of homework space. We need to think about how we're organizing this for them. The other piece of this I will say is IEPs, I think we've talked about this before, are written in a way that every person has their section. So you're the speech person. This is your speech goal. You're the OT. Here's your fine motor. It's not written in a way that actually looks at the whole brain. So let's say I come in and I do the behavior. What my job I feel like is to take all of that information, figure out how it's behaviorally impacting them, and then try to make links between all of that. So if you struggle in reading and we're saying, yep, you have impulsivity and you're screaming out. Okay, so let's think about how that's going to address how reading specifically when you're in reading instruction, that's going to be a problem with the behavior. So how are we thinking about it there? So when you're doing these kind of charts, the other piece of this that's really important is to think about you're making those links. So you can't just have the communication goal for a kid who has significant speech needs because that's going to drive them crazy. That's not
Yeah.
reasonable. But the other part of it is who is teaching them? Who is responsible from the team for these components? We write a lot of stuff in IEPs and it asks you, you are supposed to say, what is the teaching plan? I don't know how many IEPs you see that have a teaching plan in, but this is, I think, a huge component of in that chart, who's doing it, when, where, When do
Yeah.
we know that they've done it? How do we know that they've
I
achieved
love
some
that.
sort of competency in it? Because some kids I will
Mhm.
say I'll do this with, and they'll get be able to spit everything back at you. So there's sort of the contrived, yeah, I can say it, but I can't do it. So then we have to
Yeah.
think about how do we do that. It's an iterative process, but it's when we're looking at the whole IEP, you really need to have an action plan in there. It's not in a document like IEP Writer and all these software. They don't really allow you to do that. So you have to create it and have then the plan yourself. These are a flow chart of how we do it and how we check it off. That is
Yeah.
essential. And particularly when you're dealing with executive functioning issues, which every kid has, but if you have ADHD, ODD, you're going to have those magnified. Where are your points of greatest weakness and how are we
Yeah.
addressing that?
I mean, I love that idea. And I really hope that parents take this to heart, because I think what you're suggesting is actually what I
I'll
do when
send
I
you an
read
example.
reports.
Yeah, I can send an example
Oh,
to you too.
okay. That's a great idea. And, I mean, that's certainly something that you could ask your team for. Like, hey, could you make a list of deficits kind of like by priority, or how they all go together? And then could we also talk about evidence-based strategies that support them as it applies to my child, keeping in mind this like tangled web of how sensory processing and executive functioning and reading comprehension and everything else all impact my child's humanity. And if we're talking about it behaviorally, like through the lens of behavior. So I think that's like really, really insightful and helpful. But we also can do that ourselves, right? Like that's
Yes.
essentially, I think, what my brain does when I read a report. I'm like, okay, here's a relative weakness. And then I go back to the end of the recommendations and I'm like, they're recommending these ways to teach and these ways to support, which I think is um super helpful. And I love the way you described, I've never heard it described, or if I have, I didn't understand it. The top down and bottom up strategies. So I had a kid, I'm just to like contextualize that for my listeners. I had a kid whose IQ was like I think it was a 144 IQ, like
It's
just
something like crazy
wicked,
gifted.
wicked smart. Like he wants to do basically what you do, Rachel, like because he wants to do like neuropsychology because he wants to figure out like other people's brains. He's just so fascinated by his own brain now that he's figured this out. But he was incredibly messy, which was making him incredibly anxious. He was just super anxious because he his body was sending him all these weird signals, but it also was moving so fast because he's so smart. Um, and that's exactly what we did for him. We got him into like regular therapy, but he learned good coping mechanisms and therapy with just this like Joe Schmo country therapist that we found. And he like did a complete 180 in um grades and in activities. Like he joined an athletic team and like got all
Wow.
new friends. And I mean, and we're talking like I can't remember exactly, and I'm probably mixing together a bunch of kids now, which is what I should do for confidentiality anyway. But we're talking like messy, like hospitalization, police kind of stuff. And then it turned into like star of the tennis team kind of
Wow.
situation. Amazing. And it definitely was top down, and then like he learned it, and then he started implementing skills, and then he was like, and I feel really regulated if I beat the crap out of people in wrestling or hit the tennis ball or
Yeah.
whatever. But then in my like clients that I work so much in the Down syndrome population, it's definitely bottom up. It's almost like we have to support them first. We have to give them the tools and then teach them why the tools work. Um,
Yeah.
because they aren't going to learn when they're that dysregulated, right?
Well, I, when you are dysregulated like that, there is no logic. You are, your animal brain has taken over. It is telling you something is wrong. Maybe it's a fight or flight response. You have a big stress response. It's telling you something is wrong. So you cannot logically think through, oh, I need to pause now. Oh, I shouldn't do this. Oh, I am going to body check them. There is no logic. And it is unreasonable to expect a dysregulated kid to perform well and to follow rules. Our
Yeah.
goal is to stop them from getting to that point. And I think this is really tricky for both parents and professionals, and particularly in schools, because you want them to learn. You're like, well, I need them to get academics though, and I want to make sure they're performing, and I want to make sure all this stuff happens. They can't just get out of things. And I've had parents say to me, well, I really want them to, like, when are you going to start really teaching them these skills, the academic? And I always say, we can't teach anything until we have a regulated learner. So yeah, they're going to get out of this work, and that's fine. We can make up that time, and we can also provide more academic supports. But what you can't do is expect a kid to retain any information when they are fighting off an intense stress response. So
Yeah.
regulation is always key. When they show they can be regulated to whatever criteria works to their baseline, great. Now we can shift our expectations. Now we can talk about how to build academic or build more tolerance or really use those coping skills more independently. You cannot do that from the jump. It's one of the biggest problems in most IEPs is the long-term goals end up being something they simply could never achieve because it's asking them to stop doing all of these things are their natural instincts, which is to like run or to basically to stop feeling as strongly.
Yeah.
And, not to go on a tangent about ADHD and ODD brains, but, mm, ADHD, you have low dopamine, you have low norepinephrine. So it means that you're not going to be really motivated by a lot of things. So you're not going to be like, oh, really? Do I get a star if I finish my reading when I really don't like to read? And the
Yeah.
norepinephrine is basically like, yeah, you're going to it's really hard for you to shift that attention. So we can't expect them to do it without really addressing all the other ways to help their body say, oh, I need to do this because it's important. And why is it important? And building all those other skills.
Mm-hmm. That's actually how I got diagnosed. I was testing my adrenals for another reason, like mainly for anxiety reasons. And my adrenals are like so low, it's almost like I'm dead. And my like, how are you awake? How do you care? But what was really interesting was about 2 years prior to testing, to doing that particular round of testing, I had and all of this, by the way, started with my weight. Like, I ended up at an integrative doctor because I always say my insides and outsides don't match. Like, I'm super healthy, I eat healthily, I work out, and my weight doesn't match, which also is common with hypermobile people with ADHD. And
That's
anyway,
ADHD, perimenopause,
yeah,
all
yeah.
the
I
stuff.
mean, pick inflammation,
Inflammation,
autoimmunity, like
chronic. I was going to say autoimmune. Yep.
pick your cause. But anyway, like in doing that and testing my adrenals, um, I had this huge epiphany because about 2 years prior, I started to notice that they would play the national anthem, which usually makes me feel this like wave of patriotism that kind of like chokes you up. Wasn't getting that. Beginning of parades, my kids' sporting events. I knew to be proud. I knew to try to conjure up that feeling, but I couldn't get that choked up, tears welling in my eyes kind of feeling. And what was explained to me then, and this is going down a deeper path, is like basically my so I was taking an SSRI, which they're like, well, that, should make your neuroreceptors catch the messages from the neurotransmitters, right? Like the neurotransmitters send out the
Yep.
messages like get excited or calm down or whatever it's supposed to be saying. And that should link those up. But if your neurotransmitters aren't sending out strong messages, or in my case, like you're dead messages because I
It's
had
just having zero effect.
none. And so I now take basically like a handful of supplements that like are kind of methylated outside of my body that make my body create those adrenal hormones so that my body is putting out more norepinephrine and dopamine and epinephrine and serotonin and all of those things. Um, and the impact of that was almost immediately incredible. Almost
That
immediate.
that is awesome. And can we have a like brief talk about medication when it comes to these conditions? Because I know
Yeah.
we're talking like talking about ADHD and ODD, but we haven't quite gotten there. But for treatment for both of those, and this is saying comprehensive in general, it's you need sleep, good sleep. You need to have movement, physical exercise. You need to have good nutrition. You need to have therapy, talk therapy, behavioral therapy, whatever it is, teaching those strategies. Medication is a component of probably a comprehensive treatment package for that reason. It's not a cure-all. It can't be used in isolation, and not everyone needs it. But what you've described in terms of these are chemical differences. So if you have oppositional defiance disorder, not only do you have low dopamine, low norepinephrine, you have low cortisol responses. So instead of having the same stress response that someone would have to, oh, the teacher's getting mad at me, you have no response. You're like, I don't care. That's why there's that apathy that comes with it. They don't have the right, they have low serotonin, which means that instead of something that should induce, like you said, happiness or even some like fear response, they don't have it. It's toned down, which means that you get a lot of apathy for things that you shouldn't, or misplaced sort of um, their feelings of, oh, this is exciting me, is the stuff that is more antagonistic. It's
Yeah.
all chemical. So you want to address it from all sides, what you put in your body, how you rest your body, how you move your body, how then developing new neural pathways by actually using talk therapy, behavioral therapy to create new neural pathways, because you learn that way through repetition. But the medication is that extra little piece for some kids that says, okay, we're doing all of this, but now we need to give you a chemical prefrontal cortex. We need to give you a chemical, more of that serotonin. We need to give this to you
Yeah.
chemically while you are learning these strategies. That's sort of how we consider what I would call a comprehensive package. In research wise, is essentially all those things. If you're missing one of those components, if you don't want to do medication and the other things are working for you, fantastic. But there might be times as you go through puberty, as you're hitting adulthood, mid adulthood, where suddenly those levels, as they start to really shift again, you might want to relook at that.
Yeah.
But you can't do it
I
in
mean,
isolation.
and I love that you give that list of 5. So sleep, nutrition, movement, medication is a piece of that, and some kind of therapy.
Therapy. You either have to talk it through, behavioral therapy, ideally both.
And how do we so talk to me, can we break those down? Like, what about when kids really struggle with sleep? I have so many clients that, one of my first questions is, what medication do you take? Because then that tells me like where the deficits are. Um, how do we support better sleep?
If it's a medication issue, I would talk about the medication. When are they taking it? Sleep is best again with movement. Are they moving a lot during the day? What are they eating? Are they getting, so that all goes together. Because if you're
Yeah.
moving, if you're eating well, and you have a sleep hygiene routine, meaning that you have consistent, this is what I do before I go to bed. When you're little, everyone does the books. You need something like that as an adult too. That goes also with technology, which is hard for
Yeah.
kids, but making sure we have technologies, our appointments that you check in and check out of. Sleep is key. I'm not a big like, okay, take, not everyone needs a melatonin, not everyone needs all of that, but you need to have a good sleep routine. If you're going to have any change, a tired kid will not be a regulated kid.
Yeah.
I don't
And
know
if
if
you
you've ever
and if
read
you
this.
don't, go see somebody. Like,
So see
we
someone,
see
yeah, see a
pulmonology.
sleep, see
Yeah.
someone to help you. And there's some really good research that's come out that's basically like our kids are so sleep deprived. We do not give our kids enough sleep. Everyone needs more sleep than they're getting.
Yeah.
Just prioritize that first and foremost. All of those more natural
Amazing.
components.
I think it's so basic that it is like almost too basic. But also, here's something that I want to say to parents, because I have parents say all the time, like, school's not doing enough. School isn't supporting their ADHD. And I'm like, okay, well, and I mean, I am not attempting to say, parents, you have to do something too. But in really extreme cases where the police are involved, and like, I'm starting off with a school board hearing or a manifestation determination review or an expulsion or something like that, I am looking more at lifestyle. And in almost all of those cases, my kids are spending an exorbitant amount of time online, whether it's video games or it's their phone. They aren't doing
Yeah.
any activities. And I'm like, listen, and I never really, so the sleep thing, I think about my own family, because Jackie has like really pervasive sleep apnea and he doesn't sleep well and whatever. And we actually did finally start a sleep medication against all of my, like, it was the last resort, and it has been a
Mhm.
game changer. I'm
Oh,
here
I
to
mean,
tell
I
you.
found that too. I will say, I'm speaking personally as well, from like a sleep always being that struggle of just your brain doesn't turn off. Okay, you might need some
Yeah.
chemical help. It is your brain not figuring out the signal. Hey, it's nighttime. Hey, it's nighttime, and then you're exhausted and
Yeah.
you're not able to be your best self. Yeah. You were just saying family. It is a team though. I will say that too. It's both as a parent as well. I understand it's hard. It is all sides though. It is all
Right.
sides because we have to be able to be to agree and align. You can't say, hey, the school needs to teach every component of executive functioning.
Mhm.
They're going to do their best in the environment and the situations that they're in that context. They can't teach executive functioning that's going to relate to the stressors of the home. They're
Right.
teaching what
Right.
they can in that context. It has to be combined. The parent that a teacher is not a replacement for a parent. And I'm not putting that out on your parents either. Just means it is both. It all is all of us. And it's okay to say, I simply do not have the bandwidth. And my kid will not respond to me doing these strategies. That's why we have other therapists. That's why you might do parent-child interaction therapy. That's why you have a family therapist that comes in,
Yeah.
family-based that comes in. There are resources for that. It is a team approach, though. This is neither fast, nor is it something that you will always be working on these skills. Your child will work on these skills through adulthood.
Hmm.
This is not
And
a fast process.
and it does take the entire village, and what we do at home can support what they do at school. Like anytime I get a call that says Jack is more dysregulated at school, I'm like, okay, I'll take him to the pool tonight. The pool works. For us, the and actually like swimming laps really works. Both Jack and I can I can work in the garden for 6 hours, but unless I go do cardio, like the repetitive movement of riding a bike or swimming laps or walking my feet in this reciprocal pattern, I'm not regulated. And Jack is the same way. Going to swim in water helps. Like a dunk in water does help him, but swimming laps really helps. And I bet, and you tell us why.
Well, sorry, I'm like, this is my collaborative overlapping, as I say, instead of interrupting. It's collaborative overlapping because I'm really excited and I have to just jump in on it. It's because
I love it.
remember, we are hunter gatherers. We need to move. We are hardwired to move, to participate, to to build the herd, to do all of that. So we are actually not hardwired to sit, to stare, to write. We have to move. Our bodies are not designed to be still. We're not designed to learn in a still way. Most of us are designed to learn by doing. Mm, we are not, and we want to be part of the herd and contribute to the herd because the herd is safety. The herd lets it. So we have to move. We have to move. We need to involve that, even for the kids who come home. And the technology is exciting. It gives you this false sense that you are moving, gives you this false sense because you are working hard. Your visual spatial
Yeah.
skills are going nuts. You're really building that area, but you have to be outside. You have to pay attention to what's going on around you because remember, these kids are not going to build new skills from just video games. And believe me, my kids, I mean, they love video games and I love giving them video game time. But your brain rewires based on what you attend to. So if you're attending to 3 hours of video games, that's the wiring that your brain is doing. It's not building new relationships and connections for like being outside, for walking, for seeing what's outside, for, doing a treadmill, for doing strength training, all of that stuff. Whatever you attend to is what your brain is wiring towards. That's
Mhm.
why it's so important to move, to sleep. And I'm not saying every kid needs to be in a gym, but they do need to have more movement than most of our kids actually get. And
Yeah. And
particularly with ADHD or ODD, they need movement.
and that ADHD brain will continue to perseverate on the phone, or on the computer or the video game or whatever. So, like, I always tell my people, you can't have the phone in your pocket. You can't have the phone in the bag that's on your shoulder so that you can use it when you get to the location, or you can use it right after your taekwondo practice. It's got to be like, we are going to taekwondo. This is what we do. After taekwondo, we might even go run an errand, and then we can come home and have a healthy relationship with the video game. But that I see it all the time where, I mean, even my Jack, he'll want to take his phone on a walk. And, he says, I'm just turning on music. I'm just doing this. I'm just doing that. And I'm like, no,
No,
listen to the
technology
trees.
is a doctor appointment. It's a doctor's appointment. Check into it and then check out of it.
Mm,
That's what you have to conceptualize it as in terms of sleep hygiene routine, everyone and parents. And it is the hardest thing. Developing routines around it and boundaries is really hard. But that's what you need to think about. It's an appointment. It's an
I
appointment.
like
You
that.
can engage in it. It's like a movie and then it's done. Then it's
Yeah.
over. because the more they attend to it, it is sucked in. They do need, though, some of that hyper focus time. They need some of
Yeah.
that time to just focus and have this be the thing that they want to do. And that's great. And it can be protected where you're not interrupting it, but have bounds, have understood bounds.
Mhm.
Mm,
And it
And,
can be very regulating. Screen time can be very regulating.
oh, it shuts
So
off the brain. The cognitive fatigue after school is real. They need, like,
mhm.
my son needs to jump. And then after jumping and running and wrestling, then he's like, oh, now I actually need to just play an hour of video games. Okay, fine.
Yeah,
I'll make dinner.
that
It doesn't matter. Yeah. Check in. And now we're checking out because that appointment is finished. Your technology appointment is finished. If you can, I mean, I tell parents to do the internet shuts off at a certain time. If you can,
mhm.
for their kids, like have that where everything just shuts off. It's not you doing it. It's, oh, wow, we're all, then you can secretly turn it back on. But we're all just done. It's done for the day.
You're like, and my cellular still works. Yeah, I mean, I think that's brilliant. Okay, so we've dove a little deeper into sleep and movement. Do you have anything additional to say about nutrition? Because I definitely see this as something that parents want to know more about, but don't really know where to go. Right? Like, is it nitrates? Is it what is it? What are we looking for?
So this is beyond, I don't usually go down this route except to say to them, talk to a pediatrician, go to a nutritionist,
Yeah.
talk to someone, get the information so that you know either what your child is lacking or if they're really rigid eaters, go to a feeding specialist to help feed them. And you can do that you can be a middle schooler and still have someone who's working on increasing your diet. We need to make sure, I mean, I do a lot of smoothies now for my kids. That's like, hi, let's just make sure we have some greens and some this. There's a
Yeah.
lot more available, I think, for kids now that they can have, but that's where you need to look at. I would advise against saying, oh, I'm just going to buy some supplements because I read an article, because that can be very dangerous when you're getting into some of those levels. You don't want to have too much vitamin B, vitamin D. That's not going to be
Mhm.
safe for them. Work with someone, pediatrician, nutritionist. It might be someone who you're working with for inflammation, like you said. I mean, it takes a team to make that work,
Yeah.
but you have to look into it, work with the rigidity of eating, take a look at their diet and just make sure it is whole. For those kids who are eating a lot of just, and I have those kids too, buttered noodles, chicken nuggets, and I would want you to only have like high C or something or Mountain Dew. Like those are the kids who are like, okay, we need to expand this, else you will not
Your
have the
teeth are going to
energy.
fall out.
Your teeth are going to fall out and you're not going to have, like, no wonder you feel so crappy all the time. So, and I don't
Well,
want to,
and also because you're not crapping. Like I see
yeah,
a lot of diets that I'm like,
fiber,
how
come
do
on.
I poop?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it-
So
I'm no
that's
doctor, but
people.
have you considered magnesium? Like, good Lord.
And that's
Yeah,
the side effect for those people who do take methylphenidate or any sort of stimulant. For some kids who are growing, they might decrease their appetite. And what is positive about stimulants is that you can go off on the weekend. They're hardwired to stop in it. They don't stay in your system. They're not like Strattera, Guanfacine. You need to kind of stay in your system, or you need to grow up, build up, to the
yeah,
dose. Or build up to the effects. You can take weekends off. You can decide, hey, every weekend we're going to do this. And for a lot of growing kids, it is truly about fat. Just give them a milkshake with every meal if they're
yeah,
kids who are not into eating right now. Give them a milkshake, work with the nutritionist and pediatrician to get some supplements. But that is okay. You don't have to worry about, well, are you eating a kale salad? It's okay. Give them a chocolate milk.
yeah,
But
yeah,
that is one of the side effects. But sometimes the side effect of that, the benefits of the stimulant will outweigh that side effect. But you have to see what's right
yeah,
for your kid.
yeah. But I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that you need a balanced diet, right? And so, like, the idea is work with somebody depending on what your child needs are. So it might be
Yeah.
feeding therapy, it might be OT, it might be a speech therapist if it's like a motor planning thing, might be a
I love that.
nutritionist.
The advice from this is like, what your kid needs? I'm going to just give it all to you guys. Sleep and movement and good food. We're solving the world's problem. Put that in the IEP.
Actually, so this
Screw
is
them.
what I want to do. I want to go backwards, because like the next obvious step is how do we support ADHD and ODD? Like, let's really dive in. But before we do that, I want to know because like this is so enlightening and like easy for parents to understand. I want to know what you say to this. What is ADHD and what is ODD? Let's just tell people what they are.
They are neurodevelopmental differences, my friend, meaning that they are there are structural differences in the brain. Both conditions have smaller prefrontal cortexes, which makes sense. That's where all that executive functioning comes, your working memory, your planning, your task initiation, your organization, all the self-regulation, impulsivity. They have smaller prefrontal cortexes, and then they also have chemical differences. We already talked about lower dopamine, lower norepinephrine if you have ADHD. If you have ODD, lower cortisol. The research is sort of mixed on the serotonin, but in general, you can expect you're going to have lower chemicals, which means why you have sort of a stunted response or lower stress response to what other kids might have. More of a typical response would be like, oh, I guess I should do this because this person's an adult and I know that pleasing adults is what I should do because then I get X, Y, or Z. If you have ODD, that's a lower chemical. So you're not going to have a response to that, the same kind of stress response or fear response as other kids. ADHD, both are hereditary largely. It's not the same thing where you have like a chromosome or something. You can't do a blood test for it, but most likely there is someone else in your family who has this condition. ADHD and ODD are both, eh, they're related. If you have ADHD, does not mean you have ODD. But if you have ODD, there's a really high likelihood that you also have ADHD because of what we just said. You have that smaller prefrontal cortex. And so it means that you're all going to have all those same struggles in executive functioning. But on top of that, with ODD, because you have even lower levels of basically all these important chemicals, your patterns of behavior and what you are driven by is very different. So what I mean by that is ODD, the way you get diagnosed with ODD is patterns of antagonistic behavior. Patterns of behavior that would be quote unquote defiant, antagonistic, you can't take responsibility for your actions, versus ADHD, where you're really diagnosed by either, in layman's term, being really hyperactive or spacing out and not able to focus or being really impulsive with your speech. Doing this little crash jokes. ADHD is a little bit easier to see and say, oh, okay, you have ADHD. ODD is that pattern. You're looking for patterns of behavior that are consistent across adults and are consistent across time. It's a much harder diagnosis to get, and it's a really hard diagnosis to work with.
Do you see that people are diagnosed with ODD what is like kind of a last resort? Sometimes I tell my clients that it's kind of code for like he bad and we don't know what to do about it. Like it's almost
Sometimes.
like a catch-all. And I'm like, the way that you describe the neuro like the
Neurotransmitters. Yeah.
neurochemicals, yeah, I'm like, oh, that totally makes sense. That's the best explanation I've ever seen for ODD.
Well, and the thing that's tricky with ODD too is ODD doesn't mean that you're antagonistic towards everyone. So if we could
Mhm.
go into like pathological, I can never say that word, pathological demand avoidance, which is a subprofile of autism, which can read very similarly.
Mhm.
But that's more where ODD is about gaining power. PDA is about fear, like feeling
Yeah.
afraid, but it comes off as similar. Yeah, ODD. Everyone says ODD if they have a kid that's hard and that's antagonistic. And everyone assumes if you have ODD, you're just a really, really bad kid. It's hard to have compassion for ODD, sometimes in schools, especially when they're antagonizing you. I think of it as almost OCD. So, if you're obsessive compulsive, you have rituals you have to engage in, you feel anxious if you don't, you must do it. Your body's
Right.
telling you, I have to do this, else you're going to have maybe even a panic attack. ODD to me is very similar. You are compelled, you are chemically compelled to try to thwart authority, to try to make sure whoever is trying to tell you what to do, you say, well, you don't have control over me, just so you know. And
Mhm.
the reason you do that, it is a compulsion. You do that out of having poor self-confidence, having terrible social skills, not having a lot of these executive functioning deficits. So you don't have a pause button. You just say what you think. It's not always overt. Sometimes these are covert things you're doing. Someone tells you to put your shoes on and you just put your toe on, toe in, some of it isn't always as loud, but ODD is a compulsion. You are comfortable in conflict. You want conflict. You crave conflict. That's where you feel secure.
Mhm.
You feel insecure when someone's trying just to like give you praise or try to have a conversation with you, like as a teacher, as an authority figure. You don't know what to do with that because you have terrible social skills. So you actually try to bat that away. That's where you're uncomfortable.
Yeah. So good. So, okay. So, um, gosh, that was so great. So then we're on ODD. Let's talk about what we do about it. So, like, you're seeing this a lot more and you're diving in for kids and like figuring out how do we support your ODD at school and presumably also at home and in the community? Like, how do we support kids that when they are not motivated? Because I liked what you said earlier, like I'm matching that up with the like lack of intrinsic motivation or
Yeah,
lack
none of
of
it.
like
Yeah.
and like won't work for a reward because you aren't motivated by a reward.
Yeah, it's really hard. And the problem with ODD too is, and I feel badly for these kids. I work with kids who are twice exceptional often, who are gifted and have ODD. So it's hard. Yeah, they can do all the work. They won't, or when they want to. And it's so frustrating for teacher teams. And I understand to have someone who is basically, whose job in the classroom is to essentially make sure that they're in control, not you. That's really
Right.
hard for a lot of teacher teams. And you can't get into a power of will. You shouldn't anyhow with students, but definitely not with kids with ODD. You will lose because they feel most comfortable when they can do that. They will be there all day. You think you can
Mhm.
throw down? They'll throw down and say, I don't need to move. I'd be here. So you have to avoid that. You will always lose and look foolish. I'm sorry. Like people who try to like
Right.
show that line, I'm like, oh, you're gonna lose. But we can work with these kids. You just have to work with them and not force a will on them. Back down to executive functioning. Where are their deficits? You already know that these kids are going to have terrible social skills. They're going to need social practice. They have no self-regulation skills. They have low motivation. So we need to figure out from the motivation. They need to tell us, what do you want? They might say, I want to get out of class 30 minutes early. You can say, all right, what if we do 5 minutes every class? As a team, you prioritize what's the biggest issue with this kid? What is the thing that is most disruptive for us? And then as a team, you work with that kid to say, I'm worried about this. Some of it's the, collaborative problem solving from Roth Green, and some of it is using the behavior contracts. This is what the problem is. This is the school rule. How can we come together? This is what we'd like to change. What would you like from this? What do you think are the right choices for you? What would you like to earn?
Mhm.
They have to be the ones in charge of that. And it's okay if the one thing they want to earn right now is no homework. Okay. We have to be willing to give a little bit, give us a little bit
Yeah.
and see if they can meet it and then figure out, okay, well, now you've done this really well. What if we try to, can we change this behavior? Or would you be able to do extra time here? Whatever it is, you have to be flexible. If you are not flexible as a teaching team, you will not, this kid is going to continue to fail, not learn the skills, and probably then be at risk of conduct disorder and later antisocial personality disorder. We cannot force our wills on ODD kids. Be flexible, figure out what they do, are motivated by. Since they have such a low motivation in general, you've got to figure it out. And it might be at home. It might be, I want an extra hour of video games every week.
Mhm.
Great. Parents, we have to do that. It has to be flexible. And the one thing we can't hear is, well, why do they get away with it? Just doesn't. Just doesn't.
Yeah. What about the socialization? Because a lot of times at schools, I'm like, okay, so we need to look at their pragmatic language. Like they don't know how to communicate, especially when we put that into like the sensory processing of like their interoception. They don't know how they feel. They don't know how to say how they're feeling. They can't label it. They certainly can't like extract it and tell you how other people are feeling. And then you put that into pragmatics and like they have no idea how to say like, I am feeling threatened in this moment, or this is not stimulating enough. I'm bored, or any of those
Yeah. And
things.
how to say that in
And
a way that isn't mean. Or like isn't like you're a bad
right, like
teacher.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it when I go into a class and they say he yelled, the dumb fat lady in the cafeteria. I'm like, well, is she dumb and fat? Because chances are she is.
I was in
Immediately.
the, who's this old lady? And I'm like, how dare you? How you?
I just got highlights and Jack keeps asking me what's wrong because the back of my hair, like I got a partial, so
Oh,
the bottom back didn't get highlighted. And he keeps saying, "What's wrong? What's wrong with your hair?" I'm like, and then yesterday he likes to
the
touch my hair like
audacity.
it's like a fidget for him, sensory thing. And he goes, "I'm not touch that part." And I was like, "Well, soon enough it'll all be gray, and then
Yeah,
you'll
don't
touch it
you
again.
worry.
It'll lighten up." Um, So yeah, like, okay, well, was she actually old? Yeah. Okay. Well, so, but like there is this socialization thing. Like I say to my own kid a lot, and he does not have an ODD diagnosis, but he's as spicy as they come. I'm like, you can be uncomfortable. I'm totally fine with you being uncomfortable. Feel all the range of emotion, but you must be pleasant in this moment. So I always say, like, it's okay to be uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable too, but I'm going to stay pleasant. And then even try to teach them out in the world, like, look, that person's upset with that cashier, but look at how pleasant they are, because I just think it's
Yeah.
like,
It's,
y-
yeah. It's
but
like,
I don't like,
what's difficult is you're trying to teach them how to exist in the social protocols that we have. Like, this is the world we live in. And if you act this way, you will be isolated and you will not have friendships and you will be lonely and you'll be more mad. You'll be more angry with yourself. And we live in a world, and again, we're hunter gatherers. So you understand, a part of you understands you must be with a group. It's important to be with a group and people to see you as part of a group. For kids with ODD, if you don't get these social skills practice when you're young, it's really hard. Because in middle school, if you try to teach them, if they're not going to do a lunch bunch with a sixth and seventh grader, you're not
right.
pulling them to do some like paired practice together. So you're trying to get them involved into clubs and other things where they can practice. But unless they have outside practice, even with a therapist, it's hard because you're saying, hey, well, let's practice these skills, but that's not a natural friendship. And friendships come with a whole lot of stressors. That
Yeah.
has to happen early. It can happen. These kids can learn it. It's not that they're always antagonistic. It's just, they will more so with like coaches and figures of authority, but they also have crippling self confidence. They do not have self confidence. They have terrible self esteem. They have deep senses of shame, yet they can't take ownership of their behavior. So that's really hard in a relationship. If you're a kid who, will say, well, I didn't do that and I'm not going to own this. And I feel really badly about it. And yet now you're not speaking to me. So now it's actually your fault. It's
Right.
pointing that finger. I wish I had a better answer for what to do for these middle school and high schoolers with ODD, because those are the ones that I see when I see them. I'm like, oh dear, like now you have sunk into the role of
Yeah.
being that kid. The earlier you can intervene and then find those friendships, cultivate them, get the play dates, force the practice, force the
Hmm.
club, force the practice. They say they don't want to do it. You have to make them. They must do it. They need to be a part of something. Whatever interest they do have, find a club or make a club for it.
Yeah. And I
They
think when you get to
need
the
it.
club, like explain to the people that they need more time, right? Because a lot of my people, I'm like, okay, we got to go get an activity. I don't care what it is. We need an activity. Ideally, it's something that's regulating, like swimming or taekwondo or like something
Yeah.
where you get repetitive, reciprocating movement, I think is very, very regulating. But then I'm like, what you have to do is you have to tell the adults that they need a second because I see it all the time where a kid will start to act up at the playground or act up at family dinner, act up at, wherever. And then everybody else is like, oh, we should go. And I'm like, imagine just being yourself. Like that is you, that is that human. And then the second that you like can't hold it together for a second, everybody leaves. Or your parents say you have to leave. You are yourself and you have to leave. Like I just think that's so hard. So I'm constantly talking about provoking empathy and the other humans that interact with your child because they need to know that this is a chemical thing. They need to know that this is an actual diagnosis. They need to know that you're trying and that they're trying. You need to know the things they're saying. So I said to my kid not too long ago, I noticed that Jack was at track practice. They track Rachel, do your kids do track?
No, no, they don't. I feel like at some point probably, but honestly, I went to my nephews and I was like, I can't run this. This is crazy. These kids are doing so many. How are they doing this?
Well, okay. It is also a freaking 18 ring circus. Like the hurdles go on and the hurdles go off, but they don't go all the way off the track. They're halfway on the track. And then there's like a javelin getting thrown, excuse me,
I
getting
can't
thrown.
do
And you
this.
have,
I can't. I would lose it.
oh
I
my
cannot.
gosh. And then if you do the shot put and the 100-meter dash, you have to listen for this announcement of when to go to shot put, when to go to the 100-meter dash. It's bonkers. So Jack does it with Unify, with Special Olympics through high school, and they go in a pack. So all unified athletes to the shot put, and then they'll all go. Well, our little team would start walking, and coach would say, okay, we're all going, the announcer lady said, go over here. So they would all go over there. And then like a solid 2 minutes later, Jack and his partner would come like do 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 like walking. Now he would be walking like I know when it's willing and when it isn't willing. So I'm not saying this is like in a compliance way, but he would be walking like he would have bought into walking to the shot put by the time they got over there. Um, but and then he would get there and he would squat down and everybody else would be like up talking and chatting, whatever. And like socialization, I always say, imagine being very social and also have social anxiety. Like it's just got to be so hard on him. I really feel sorry for him in that regard. But I was like, okay, we need to work on two things. First of all, we need to work on endurance because he's got this autoimmune thing and like he needs that. Um, and second of all, we need to work on like what I call following directions, but not in like a compliance based thing. So I said to him, and this is something I've shared with them a whole lot. You guys, I noticed these things and I asked Jack, I have noticed these. And what I want to know is, do you want help? Like when your coach says, go here and you get so stuck, do you want help? And his yes was like the most relieved, desperate, like, yes, mommy, thank you. It was like the sweetest, like, hug followed it right away. And I said, well, I don't really know how to help you. Like, where's an evidence program on how to get people to follow freaking directions, you know?
Oh,
So, and
I
I call
know.
it following directions. It's not because it's not compliance, like, thou shalt do what a grown up says or somebody else says. So so we worked on that. So like getting people to feel that empathy, my listeners are like, yes, I'm sure my kid feels the exact same way. But telling that story, taking the 2 minutes to tell that story at your IEP table to the psychologist, to these people, that can go so, so far for your kid.
Here's the thing. You don't have to like every kid you work with, and you won't. I always tell teachers that it's okay if you don't like every kid, but we do have to have compassion for their struggles because they are doing the best they can. I feel like Dr. Ross Green always says that. He's one of my favorite. I'm going to a training of his in a week. I'm so excited to be trained with him.
Where?
Like in Pittsburgh. He's coming to Pittsburgh, and so I'm doing a day training with him. And I feel like one thing that he's really brought, I think, to special education is this idea of being compassionate to the most difficult kids. And the kid probably doesn't like you either. Let's be honest, if you're acting this way.
Yeah.
But that's okay. It's not about liking. It's about teaching. And we have to be okay with kids not doing everything we say. It's okay if a kid, I read those goals that are like, oh, this kid, he's going to follow the directions of the teacher for 90% of the day. It's actually not about following directions. It's when he is feeling escalated, dysregulated, or whatever, he's going to do what he needs to do so that he can calm down and then at some point get back into it. It's actually not about following directions. It's about finding the right accommodation and support for you so that you can do the best you can in this environment. And we need to teach professionals to do that, to guide them towards not being typical, but to guide them towards what do you need and independently do it. That's all I want for every kid I work with is independently identify the need at a time before you flip a table, figure it out, know your precursors, do what you need to do, and then come back. It doesn't matter if that precursor is, I need to go sit for 20 minutes here and listen to music. People might say, well, then they're missing instruction. Yeah, but this is what they need. And honestly,
They
as
weren't
an
going to get it
adult, you
anyway.
figure it out. You will figure it out.
Mhm.
It kind of, and for kids with ODD in those environments, they're going to be competitive. It's going to be hard for them and with a coach. So you have to say to
Mhm.
that coach, look, they might try to argue with you. And I understand that that's going to be frustrating. The best thing you can do is acknowledge that you hear them and ask them for some solution. Okay, well, what could make this better? Let them have opportunities to be in control because that's what they're yearning for. And then when they see that you can problem solve, that's going to also help with the social piece. I mean, the socialness of it is really, you've got to find, I mean, as parents, it's so hard. You're like, I need a play date for my, odd child, or like my child that's like not fitting in this way, but I need to get them
Yeah.
together. The more social practice, the better, because once we hit that stage of social isolation, it's really hard to come back because they've discovered that all social interactions are failures and that
Mhm.
they're a failure in this. So they don't want to do it because you don't want to do things you're not good at. So they might just get obsessed with being online friends. And that's where I feel like the danger, that's when we're starting to get.
Oh, that's really
We don't
interesting.
want us to just be comfortable with like an online presence.
A way that we've gotten around that I didn't even realize I was doing, just a little tip, is we have drivers, because Jack isn't even old enough to get a driver's license, but he won't. And I have found these really dynamic kids that will, babysit and drive. And I have always encouraged them to have their friends come over too. So, like, I don't care if you have a friend over, I don't care if you want to meet a friend for dinner or whatever. And then I've even started saying that's really good for Jack. So, like, please don't feel bad if you want to go hang out with a friend. If you've got him for 8 hours on a summer Saturday because I've got, summer work day, even because I've got work, um, then like go hang out with other people. And I really am trying to make sure that people understand that he doesn't have stuff to do on Saturday nights. He can't, we are going to try again, but traditionally, he hasn't even been able to go to the high school football games. And so, and if he does, I highly doubt he's going to do that independently without one of us. Again, we're going to try and see how it goes. So, like, I think it's a little way around that is to like pay somebody to hang out with them because then that creates community. What has happened is, of course, these are paid friends, right? But they
But also
actually
a
are
model,
friends.
if it's an older kid, especially, like if it's
Yeah.
someone, if you have a middle schooler and there's a high school student, that's a model. I mean, I wouldn't do like a peer that can be like, oh, hey, if you go hang out with so and so, you're going to get $5. But like
Right.
if it's a model, I think that's wonderful because they need good role models of social interactions and someone who they trust to say to them, hey, can you just, and also they won't see them as much as an authority as an adult.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the young
Totally.
kids with ODD, if I could only encourage in terms of kind of the academic process, if you're in a K through 5, younger kids, do make sure they're getting social skills rehearsal from someone. They have to be getting, and then as well as all the other executive functioning supports, but the social skills rehearsal is key because then if they don't have that in 7th, 8th, it's just really hard to build naturally. Then you're just sort of like, okay, we're going to try to have these groups where they talk about their feelings and how they're doing, and they're not going to do that. And then you have
Yeah.
a resistance learner, and then they're resistant. They don't want to do it, and we're kind of stuck.
So then let's wrap up these areas of need that we're supporting. So we're supporting language,
Yeah.
um, because we're supporting at least pragmatic language, but probably also our processing of language and our ability to express ourselves, right?
Yep, absolutely. How you express yourself and how to do it in a way that is reflective. And we again, this is all based on our social protocols, and we've decided this is how we interact as a group, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
part of it is also like this is this is what we do as typical people, and now we're forcing you to do this as well because it's
I
considered
know.
socially polite. It's hard because they might be like, I don't care about that. Well, sorry,
I
it's just
know.
in our world. This is how we do it.
That's basically, I mean, I like cut to the chase that
Oh,
evenly. And I,
same. And IEP meetings, I'm
yeah,
like, I get they don't want to do this, but they exist in the classroom and in this context. So in this context, we have to find a way to make this work.
and I say it to parents all the time. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. I am like as free comes. And I'm like, be free. Like if you need, and I say to Jack all the time, he'll cuss and I'm like, So those are words that you can go say in your bedroom, but they're not polite to say around mom. And so it's just not going to happen here. Right. But like, if you need to say it, go say it, get it out. Right. And like,
Yeah.
if I say something, then I get it out and I'm like, oh, excuse me. I'm sorry that I said that
Sorry,
word
I'm
in front of
laughing because
you.
I just had that conversation with my son as well. He was saying, like, I want to say all the bad words. I'm like, all right, tell me. He's like, telling me all the bad words. I said, I'm so proud of you for like learning these words and this vocabulary. This is really not, we can't say this in school. Let me tell you why. You can't say it on the playground or at a friend's house. You can say it here, and I'm not going to bat my eye unless you are saying it to one of us in a way that is mean,
Mean.
angry, name calling.
Yes.
Like he was going up. This is my, but like,
Yes.
didn't you know that word? Wow. You haven't learned that.
I know. And, I'm like, he's a 15-year-old. So he like totally, I would not care. Like he does say like, what the hell was that? And stuff like that. And I'm like, that's okay to say here, but it's not okay to say anyplace else. And because he doesn't, those boundaries would be really hard for him. Then, because I had the same conversation with my neurotypical older kid. I'm like, there's ways that you talk with your friends and ways you talk in front of grown-ups. But yeah, I mean, I think that that's really helpful. Okay, so we're supporting speech and language. We are supporting executive functioning in many, many different ways.
Yeah, and many different components depending on sort of where their priority level are. Yep, yep,
Yeah.
where they live in terms of their needs.
And then we're supporting sensory processing.
That should be a part of that. Yeah. Any executive functioning, when you talk about the self-regulation and impulsivity, that's kind of that bottom up, figuring out what is their top down or bottom up. Is their biggest problem that they are disorganized, or is it that they're impulsive running around? Some of that regulation where if you see that means that they need the movement. They need that kind of, whether it's a movement break, whether they need more understanding of where their body is in place and time and how to deal with it versus the cognitive approach. So sort of looking at both of those, and kids usually need both, but one of them is going to be a priority, and that's where you start.
Yeah. And I think what I'm also hearing you say is we could lump these three things into physical health, but we're supporting sleep, medication, or sleep. Well, four things: sleep, nutrition, movement, and medication. And that would be like a whole healthy body.
How healthy? I mean, that's the dream, right? Like everyone would do well. We had all these things lumped together perfectly. Not everyone can do all of those. Not everyone agrees with all of those. Everyone has a priority with all of those. And whatever as a family fits your values is obviously the most important. But from a clinical perspective, those are the areas that if you want to get set up for success, if your child hits one of these profiles, that's what I would suggest looking at. Again, has to fit with your life and your family. But that's where I would say, like, these 5 things are the areas that if you address all of these, you are setting them up for the most success in our, again, typical how we've defined success here in our ableist culture.
Right. Which is like the
School
pill that
is
we all
not
have to swallow.
designed for this. Like, we have to be clear. School is not
The world isn't.
for this.
Schools
No.
are a microcosm of the world, and we're preparing them to go into the world. And so,
Yeah.
like, yes, we have to swallow that pill in order to be able to go out and succeed and function in the world.
Yes. And I do think sometimes when you're in school, like you'll say, okay, I want this, this, and this, and this. And ideally these things can all happen in the way we want. And sometimes it's they simply don't have the resources to meet. We'll be like, well, okay, we want to do that. We can't. So then you have to decide, okay, you have to, or what else?
Right.
Where else do they need to be? I mean, it's really, really tricky.
Where else can you go? Yeah.
Where else? Where are the exactly? And do those places have the resources to meet all these needs?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that was kind of my wrap up and thinking about the areas of development and humanity that we're supporting, because, I oftentimes say we need more information. Like, we need better evaluations, we need better data, we need better like progress monitoring. And so I usually encourage people to go out and get stuff. Another thing that I'll add, particularly for ADHD, sometimes for ODD, and I'm going to start to think about it differently, frankly, is do we have an academic deficit that's causing such frustration that we can't like talk about it? So I'm like, let's see if we need additional academic testing too.
I always suggest that, because even if they're like their IQ is here, you can have an amazingly high IQ, and it doesn't mean that you can necessarily do the tasks as designated
Okay.
and assigned. So you might as well do that and say, okay, yes, their IQ is here, but IQ is a number. It's not necessarily saying, but they can follow these directions, do these word problems and do X or Z. They can solve these really intense math problems, yet they actually can't do this reading test, the way the way it's laid out. So there might be those deficits. And in fact, there probably are.
Yeah.
And they're probably not addressed because everyone's so focused on their behaviors. If I hear more, they could do it, but they don't. It
Right.
sort of doesn't matter, because if they're not, then we have to treat it all as a deficit. We have to treat everything as being, well, then there must be something here that's going on, whether it's environmental, behavioral, the way the task is presented, or just simply the material. We have to treat it all as a problem, all as a deficit, even if it's not.
And I'm going to throw in also the adults. Sometimes we have
Oh,
to have the hard discussion with our kids team about like the adults that are going to support our kids. How can we get them to have more like co-regulating strategies and more respectful communication with our kids?
yeah. If you can't call out a kid with ADHD or ODD to tell them to pay attention, or hey, stay with, come on, I need you to stay here. And then for a kid with ODD, they're going to just say, challenge accepted. Now I'm not, and now I'm going to do this. And so then they get disciplined when it's actually, it's really just that you sort of set them off and they're not wired in a way that's going to allow them to continue and move forward and to try to get in that, power struggle with them if successful.
Yes.
But it is hard. And I don't think gen ed teachers get a lot of training, to be honest, on that. They get a lot of
Right.
typical classroom management techniques are not going to work with those kids. So,
Mhm.
if you have so and so gets this and we're having all this group contingency in play, it's not going to work. And it's just going to make these kids feel like failures.
Mhm.
So it takes a lot of reteaching and really, when I talk about growth mindset, and that's, yes, it's a growth mindset, but how does all this stuff actually pull into practice? I mean, everyone needs more education in how to approach neurodivergent kids.
Yeah.
We are still failing in that way, just across the board. We're just still failing in how to help these kids in a way that's cohesive, in a way that everyone takes ownership, and it's not just a special ed case manager. That's a
Is
different.
there the answer might be no, but is there an organization that you think provides amazing trainings that parents could suggest to their teams?
I do a lot with attitude, ADD, ITUDE. Russell Barkley's on there. He does a ton. He's amazing. Obviously, Chad is great. That the ADHD organization. They also do stuff with ODD as well.
Yeah.
There's someone, I always forget what the acronym stands for, but Chessie maybe. Russell Barkley again. He's like the leading person I go to for ADHD. A lot of his stuff is
Yeah.
heavy in terms of the research because he is a researcher. But if you want
And
someone
it's
who
good.
really, but it's really comprehensive, and he's
Mhm.
actually one who really talks about different profiles in ADHD. So how to consider it. There's something I watched something with him talking about sluggish cognitive tempo, which is a terrible name, but it's essentially like these slower processing speeds in kids. And how do we actually help those kids? Because they have a slightly different profile than our typical ADHD. So I would go for those. I would not, there's a lot of misinformation out there. This is the world we live in. So I would just
Yeah.
check the sources, check the citations, make sure these people have the qualifications to be talking about what they're talking about. I mean, you have to kind of weed through that anyway. And I know as a parent, especially when you're desperate, you're like taking anything. But just look at those. I would always go to Chad, and I always, because that's the ADHD, and they also have an ODD sub branch. But there's also an ODD. I can't remember the acronym now. National organization, but I would go to them first. And then Attitude, I really like the authors there, and they have a lot on autism, especially our AUHD kids, which is a whole,
Yeah.
other profile. Um, yeah, they're really good, and they have a lot of parent and professional resources.
I'm gonna link all of that. And I will also link do you think The Explosive Child is Ross Green's like seminal book? Do you think that's the book to link to like start with Ross
Probably,
Green? Okay.
probably. That's the one I would go to, because
I'm
that's the
looking over
first
there.
one. I was gonna say, I'm looking at my library right
Oh,
now. I'm trying to see, do I have any other one that I'm like, yeah, I would do Explosive Child. I mean,
okay.
wonderful. You're not gonna go wrong with Ross Green, and he has some amazing online trainings, just listen to him talk. Though he is the most compassionate speaker about ODD, especially, I
Yeah.
think, which is again, a really hard diagnosis. I also, something that can be helpful sometimes for teams too, is I always use the Yardsticks. That's a book about child development, and it's for elementary, but it gives the snapshot of what you're looking at this age. And sometimes that can be really helpful because we work with these kids who are like 8 years old and everyone's expecting the moon of them. And then you are like,
Yeah.
break this down for you as the team about what you need. I mean, I just bring the book sometimes to meetings to say, this is what's typical.
Right.
And
This is, yeah.
this is still a typical range. Yeah, in high school, it's not as relevant. At that point, you expect to have certain markers and certain developmental milestones, but that can be also really helpful as a parent too. You think your kid's so atypical? Well, just look at this. They're so like a lot of their behaviors might still be in a typical range, which is
That's
why,
a really great idea.
like we said at the beginning, like they're not cute anymore. That's why sometimes it's like typical and then they're not. But I will say along with this too, I was just in a third grade classroom and everyone's like, oh, that kid, this kid who has all these things going on. Oh, he's not with a good work. He's not paying attention. They're like, we're going to go say something to him. And I stopped. The teacher and the parent said, wait, stop. Look at everyone else. Everyone else is looking around. They're looking at their nails. They're tapping. And I said, do you see how he is absolutely doing what everyone else is doing? Do not pay attention. Yeah, he's not paying attention. No one else is. Like, get loud and stop the microscope. Pull back, do a bird's eye view of the classroom and say, okay, is this something we need to intervene on? Probably not. No one's paying attention. It's okay. Like, look also around. You have to. Else we're just poking at these poor kids. Yeah, we're all inattentive sometimes. How many times in a meeting are you playing on your computer? I was playing
right.
Like on my phone the other day.
Stop poking.
Yeah.
Rachel.
Stop poking everybody. That's the stop putting a microscope on these kids. I'll they all get these check marks and then they explode. And we're like, well, they were so inappropriate. They weren't paying attention. It's like, but we did that. It wasn't appropriate. No, like the explosion, the body check is not appropriate, but we caused it by not being able to have that lens. I don't know. It's hard.
So good.
Kids are hard.
So good, though. I mean, this is really, really helpful. Like I told you before we logged on, I have several people that I am trying to support that are experiencing a lot of trouble at school with behavior. And I really feel like this will help them help the parents understand it better. I have more tools in my toolbox that I can take to teams. So I'm so appreciative. Thank you.
Appreciative of you. I just want to have like Friday nights with Ashley where we just have a glass of wine and say, so what have you seen this week? What have you seen? And we're just like,
help me.
Not that we need anything else to get us more off task, but I feel like this is what we need to do. So if any listeners just have a glass of wine, just in your
That's right. That's right. You just dive in and listen to Late Nights with Rachel and Ashley. Let's do it.
Yeah, we'll think of a theme song.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.